what's going on, y'all? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And you're about to watch a little OTB LSU.
We're going to give you all the latest, greatest between LSU football, baseball, women's basketball, softball, and everything in between.
Bottom line, if you want to talk Tigers, keep it locked, subscribe, like it, and we hope you enjoy the NFL draft season continues right along, right? Which means we're going to have about 1 million of these stories like these. But some of the latest mocks are maybe starting to toy with the idea of Malik Nabers over Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, again, you kind of hesitate to put too much into any of these reports because kind of A, what does it really matter? B, if you're not in those rooms with those teams, you can't really truly know what they are prioritizing or what their individual scouting process is like. Like I thought Jake gave us some interesting insight with the Mark Dominic conversation where maybe you have a guy who's like, okay, these are the 10 traits that I value. Well, we don't know what, we don't know their system. We don't know what traits they value. We don't know how much weight they put on each trait, et cetera, et cetera. But there is an idea out there starting to crop up of Malik Nabers over Marvin Harrison Jr. And it's not, it's something that I've seen independently of Taylor linking this article in the document this morning. Like we talked to a draft expert, Thor Nystrom, Thorku, on Twitter, who I've actually followed for years. A great follow for you fantasy guys as well. And he thinks Malik is the best, right? And he thinks that in terms of fantasy, when it comes to rookies that could have an impact next year, he's all about Malik Nabers dominating. Just does not see how you can deny him the ball. And it's funny, we don't talk about this a lot, but there's maybe been no greater, like we always talk about quarterbacks benefiting off of the offensive rule changes. I don't think any position has gained as much space or gained as much advantage as the wide receiver position. And I always think about this. Back in the day, rookie wide receivers never went over 1,000 yards. Ever, ever, ever. That's why it was such a massive deal when Anquan Bolden did it. It was such a massive deal when Marcus Colston did it. But now it feels like you have 2, 3 guys every single season that are rookies that are eclipsing that mark. I mean, last year, obviously, highlighted by Puka Nacua. And, I mean, we've seen Justin Jefferson, Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham. Like, there's been plenty from LSU, Jamar Chase, that have done that as well. And so, yeah, and I think a lot of that is because of the decreased physicality in the league. And when you're protecting quarterbacks by extension, that makes it easier to get the ball to receivers. So, like, they've benefited greatly off these rule changes. But the overall point of this is that when you draft a receiver, you can expect him nowadays to come in immediately and be a badass. And I'm sure that both Malik Nabers and Marvin Harrison Jr. will both be badasses, but it's impossible not to see why Malik would be so particularly good in this current era of NFL football. I mean, the speed, the quickness, the route running, the hands, and the yak especially. The ability to move after the catch is made, run hard, to find ways to maximize the plays. And when you combine that, I mean, we mentioned the rule changes, but how about the rise of the slot receiver over the last decade? Into which Malik just slots in perfectly. Like there are a ton of elements working in Malik Nabers' favor right now that point to him being an immediate success in the NFL. So shout out Malik. Love seeing him get his flowers. Should have been the Biletnikoff winner. Got denied there. Would love it if you could kind of win the ultimate battle of maybe, not that this matters beyond anything in pride, right? Because both guys are going to be high-level first-round picks. But there would be something nice about, if you're an LSU fan, a little justification about Malik Nabers being drafted over Marvin Harrison Jr.
You were talking about him winning the Biletnikoff, and I don't want this to turn into a bashing Marvin Harrison Jr. segment because he's great in his own right, but T-Bob, it's about time. In my opinion, it's about time that this happens. You're splitting hairs in some of the categories, but what are you looking for, right? We know they're good. Their numbers are great. Malik, little over 1,500 yards, 14 touchdowns. Marvin Harrison, 1,200 yards, 14 touchdowns. Harrison, half a yard per catch better average in terms of yards per catch.
So equal.
Yeah, you're splitting hairs here.
Yeah.
But when you look at consistency, it's not close. It's not close at all. Malik Nabers' worst game at LSU was the first game of the year against Florida State. 6 catches for 67 yards.
Yeah.
Marvin Harrison had 4 games last year under 35 yards receiving.
Yeah.
It's not close. So you're more consistent, Malik Nabers. Route running, in my opinion, it's by far Malik Nabers. You just brought up the slot receivers, how deadly they are in the NFL. Not to say that Harrison Jr. can't do it, but there's a lot more film. Malik Nabers has shown a lot more ability to play in the slot. So I don't want it to be like, well, Marvin Harrison Jr. is getting hyped up because of his name, because he's great in his own right.
No, he's awesome.
There has been a little bit of bias towards that, because maybe now people are actually starting to watch the film, break it down, get a little bit more of a deep dive into it, and be like, wait a minute, just because Malik Nabers' father's not a Hall of Fame football player, this guy can play a little bit too. So I think this is a long time coming.
And look, Greg Amon says, Malik had a much better quarterback, to be fair. And that is true. And that's kind of the ironic part, right? Is that Malik almost got punished for having a great quarterback, whereas Harrison got his thumb put on the scale a little bit for having an okay quarterback. And I don't know. I mean, that's kind of flawed potentially, but it also just is what it is. I think what Taylor's saying is the more true statement in that, regardless of stats. And I do like the consistency, though, from a game log standpoint. But regardless of stats, it's going to be the film breakdown in which you try to decide between these two. And look, I'm not out here grinding film for the draft. I don't really care that much. But the people who are starting to come around to Malik Nabers maybe being wide receiver 1 in this draft.
You do hear that argument a lot. Well, Malik Nabers had a lot better quarterback. He did, but nobody wants to point out the fact that he's competing with Brian Thomas for catches. Marvin Harrison had nobody on his team that was as good. Now, the argument could be, well, they keyed in more on Marvin Harrison Jr., and that's fine. But if you're Malik, you're competing with catches with Brian Thomas Jr., okay? Kyron Lacey was no slouch either. Mason Taylor caught a bunch of passes, and you're now having to block more downfield because your quarterback takes off and runs.
He's a great blocker.
Yeah, so he's a better blocker downfield. Your quarterback runs a lot more than Kyle McCord. That's less pass opportunities that are coming to you. You have an elite receiver on the other side. That's less pass catching opportunities that are coming to you. So that works both ways. Yes, you had a better quarterback. He was more dynamic, so he's taking off and running more than Kyle McCord was. And you're competing with a lot better receiver than Marvin Harrison Jr. was as well. So I think that argument goes both ways.
It does go, it does go both ways. That's why it's kind of flawed either way, is because it can, it can be used into whatever point you believe should be the correct answer. You can kind of manipulate it to support your point. Shout out Malik though. Would love to see it. Wow, Jake, what incredible takes.
I mean, those guys, they're just the best.
I think so. And if you think so, again, hit the like button, subscribe. Ring the bell so you get notifications when we post every single day here on OTB LSU.